This report is brought to you by Water Smacker, the countertop water ionizer. Please view their ad at the end of this report. Good evening. Here's the latest on the horrific event in the City of Lights 12 days ago. Last night, Tucker Carlson and good guy former D.C. police homicide investigator Ted Williams brought a good deal of skepticism to the latest police version of the events about the crime of the year.
The Las Vegas shooting was an unusual story from the beginning, bizarre in some ways. But 10 days into the investigation, things are getting stranger, if anything, more baffling. Initial accounts and the timelines for the shootings have been replaced. A new timeline featured on the Today Show indicates police could have identified Stephen Paddock's location far earlier than they actually did. Watch.
This is the sound of the actual first shot Stephen Paddock fired from his Las Vegas hotel room.
Someone's firing a rifle on the 32nd floor down the hallway.
According to a revised police timeline, that was 9:59. Paddock began firing at the crowd outside at 10:05, then stopped at 10:15. A police SWAT team got to the 32nd floor at 10:17, and a minute later learned that the guard was shot and where the shots came from. That means it took Las Vegas police 19 minutes to find out what the guard and the engineer already knew, where a man was firing a gun on the 32nd floor.
And then, despite one of the biggest police investigations in the history of Las Vegas, somehow Paddock's home was broken into. His house in Reno was broken into by someone. We don't know why. We don't know what they took, if anything. Chris Kudialis writes for the Las Vegas Sun. Ted Williams is an attorney and former D.C. homicide detective, and they both join us. Ted, to you first. This timeline doesn't seem to make any sense at all.
It doesn't make any sense, Tucker. It's weird and bizarre, and you've got to wonder what is law enforcement saying to the public out here. They gave us this initial timeline that Campos was shot during the course of the actual shooting into the crowd.
He's the security guard.
He is the security guard.
But let me just ask, why would he be at Paddock's door in the first place? This was before any shooting took place.
What had happened, Tucker, is that an alarm had went off up there. He's a security guard for the hotel, so he went up to check the alarm. The Paddock had all of these cameras he had in place, saw him coming, shot 200 times through a door, and hit him in the leg with one of the some shrapnel.
This has always been interesting to me, and I have not seen anyone else bring this up. We know from the audio tracks that these weapons fired at about 11 rounds per second. That would be 19 seconds of firing if continuous. Gun experts say that there are 250-round magazines for the weapons pictured in the police photos of the crime scene, but only 100-round magazines are visible. That means that the shooter had to reload, lengthening the time it would have taken to shoot 200 rounds. Do you think that the guard would have just stood there for 25 seconds as automatic weapons fire shredded the door? The point is that the story about 200 rounds sounds preposterous, as does much of everything we have been told by the Las Vegas police at this point. That is, since the sheriff and undersheriff suddenly did 180s about having evidence that the shooter had help, had an escape plan, and did not want to die. One other thing, if this guy was such a cold-blooded killer, why did he shoot for the legs of the guard? Wouldn't a killer want to kill the guy? One other thing, the previous timeline made some sense that once he had shot the guard, he would have known that the police would certainly be close behind. Yet this guy, who had an escape plan and did not want to die, then focused all his attention to laying down a withering 2,000 rounds of automatic weapons fire. The entire thing makes no sense, and that's the reaction both Tucker and Ted Williams display throughout this entire interview.
And then waited 6 minutes, opened fire, and it was more than an hour before police made it into the room. Chris, that account, that timeline, which is the revised version, is now being apparently contested by the hotel, which says that's wrong. Am I getting that correct?
Correct. MGM, Tucker, has said that they don't necessarily agree completely with the timeline that police have provided. So I think this is the first time throughout the 10-day investigation that MGM and police haven't, at least publicly, seen eye to eye on that.
Well, okay. What do they disagree with? Why is every detail of this story held on too tightly? It's like pulling teeth to get anything solid, nearly 2 weeks after the crime.
On this timeline.
But why have the authorities, why the investigators so radically changed the sequence of events, the timeline? Why did they do that?
Metropolitan Police here in Las Vegas has really made an effort over the past 5 years to really become as transparent as possible. And they've really tried to show the public everything that they know as soon as they know it. And a lot of times you see...
As you can see, veteran cop Ted Williams ain't buying a single word of this nonsense. He knows darn good and well that the only reason for a major change like this is the other timeline would reveal something the cops and or the FBI wants to hide, would be my guess, and apparently Ted's as well.
This is not a small thing, though. I mean, these are the core facts of the case. And it is very confusing to me. Here's what we know, though. Apparently, Paddock's home, Ted, in Reno, was broken into. This is part of an active homicide investigation. You were a homicide investigator. How could you leave the home of the suspect unsecured a week after the crime?
You know, Tucker, this was evidence. As you know, they've served 2 search warrants on Paddock's homes. You would have think that all of his homes would have continued to be secure. The sad commentary, and we need to admit it, this was Keystone Cop. When I say Keystone's Cop, that place should have been secure. It was not, unfortunately.
Well, it's just, Chris, I think part of the problem, I mean, the shooter apparently is dead. I mean, we're assuming there was just one shooter.
There you go. Tucker's skepticism is deep, and rightly so. The dead body may not even have been the shooter. His family had him immediately cremated. Tucker has heard the differing sounds of the weaponry used. Obviously, one was a much heavier weapon, and from the experts we have consulted, it is a weapon that makes a signature sound. This weapon has such a kick that it cannot possibly be held and fired accurately by a single person. And as far as we know, it nor its shell casings were found in the room on the 32nd floor. More on this later.
But this shakes the public's faith in anything the investigators say. Again, have they given any indication of what new information they found that caused them to totally rearrange their understanding of what happened?
Really, they haven't. In terms of speaking to the media, they haven't been offered they haven't really offered any new information as to why the timeline shifted. Sheriff Joe Lombardo really kind of staying tight-lipped, if you will, with regards to what happened, why the timeline shifted.
Given this fact set, Ted, without speculating too much,
sure,
what's the likely explanation from what we know, or is there even one?
Look, Tucker, you and I are going to be here next year, and I can unequivocally tell you, I don't think we are going to find the motive behind this killer. He's dead.
What's with this search for the motive? We don't care. The search for the motive is only an attempt to pin it on a single gunman when a fair assessment of the little bits of information we can get on this case shows it is much more likely a conspiracy with several people involved than not. None of my basic questions enumerated in earlier videos have been answered. Until I see a complete accounting of the items found in the room on the 32nd floor, I'm not buying any of this. In that accounting must be the number of shell casings, an obvious fact that is easy to provide, unless you are hiding something. Where is the autopsy result? That's been done, typed, and in a file somewhere. Where is a complete second-by-second reconstruction of the audio evidence of every shot fired? This would be easy to do, without question, because of the massive number of cell phone camera videos during the event. None of this seems important to anyone but Tucker Carlson and the rest of America. On top of all this, the really easy stuff, there are very heavy allegations that we need to know about. The alleged shooter, Steve Paddock, was a multimillionaire who had not worked since the 1980s, yet he lived an elegant lifestyle. He was a licensed and experienced pilot who owned 2 airplanes. Rumors abound that he was an arms smuggler and human trafficker with these planes. Also in the rumor category, but worthy of inclusion because this needs to be chased down by professional investigators, is that it is said that Paddock owned a company named Paradise Ranch 21, a joint venture with the Philippine Children's Fund of America, which provides a temporary home for children flown in from the Philippines. I do not have the resources, including the time, to chase down these rumors, but someone must do it. Lastly, we have heard exactly nothing from any member of Congress calling for a congressional investigation into this, the largest mass murder in U.S. history, and specifically of followers of the current President Donald Trump. Why? Again, please sign our petition calling for this investigation. Is that really too much to ask? See the link below in the description box. Tucker sums up my frustrations at the end.
I would settle for the facts, actually, at this point. Can't get those out.
I'm still reporting from the one-time free speech capital of the world. Good day. This report is brought to you by Water Smacker, the countertop home